I'm Dan Pascone, CEO of Tailored Wealth and host of the Making Sense of Your Money podcast. Real conversations that help high earners make sharper decisions so their money works as hard as they do. This is episode number 40, and today I'm joined by Chris Hilliard of Winnow Solutions to break down the hidden rules that shape how your money is protected and sometimes how it isn't. We dig into the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, state regulators, and what every investor should know about the fine print and fairness. If you find this valuable, tap like and subscribe so you never miss an episode that helps your money make more sense.
Brought to you by Tailored Wealth, helping business leaders live their version of a rich life.
Welcome to another edition of the Making Sense of Your Money podcast, where we cut through the financial noise and help business leaders to make smart, confident money decisions. Chris, thanks for joining the Making Sense of Your Money podcast today. Really excited to have you, man.
It is great to be here. I really appreciate it, Dan. Thanks for having me.
You bet. We have a lot we're going to get into today, and I know our audience is going to want to hear your expertise on a bunch of different issues. I think this is going to be a really, really interesting one. And, compliance is such an important part of the financial services industry, as you know, probably as well as anyone. I want you to just give us a quick high-level overview of your background, because I think it's unique on what's led you to what you're doing today, and then share with us a little bit about what you and your team helped to solve for at this point.
Sure. No, I'd love to. I've been really in compliance my entire career. Not a lot of folks say that. Not a lot of folks yeah, I spent a ton of time in compliance. It's awesome. But really, I started my career in compliance. It was one of those things where I had a lot of people that believed in me, and that as we continue to talk, that's kind of will show you what shaped how I view the world and how I think about things now. And I started off in compliance and I've been there for over 20 years at this point now, multiple different, very large institutions like Lehman Brothers and Ameriquest. I ran compliance for North America for the State Bank of India. It's been an interesting experience. But my most recent experience and outside of Winnow, which we'll get into, was at a company called Payoff, now called Happy Money.
Okay.
And we are an online financial wellness and credit card debt consolidation loan company. We were the first fintech to actually partner with credit unions. We wanted to be very member focused. We didn't think of people as customers. We thought of them as members. We thought of them as extended. I know it sounds cliche and trite and whatnot, but we really did think of them as true extended members of family and wanted to have them treated the way that we would want our family members to be treated. And that meant, being upfront about things and getting out there and having plain speak, notes and understandable terms and things like that. And while I was there, we spent a ton of time having to get licensed across the nation. 85 different licenses from one coast to the other, including things like credit services organization licenses and lender licenses and serving licenses and debt buying licenses. It was all over the place. And so I'd spent a significant amount of money with a great law firm called the Buckley Firm. And in talking with them, it was one of those things where I said, hey, there's got to be a better way to do this. There was a good natural inflection point for me to leave there and actually go and help found the company that I'm at now, Winnow, for the Buckley Law Firm. It's one of those companies, Winnow is, that would not be able to be born out of private equity or VC. We spent 3.5 years just collecting data, and that data was on all of the privacy, compliance, financial services related rules and regulations that basically govern all of the financial services organizations in the country on a federal and state level. There was a big lack of coverage on a state level when we got into the market, and there still really is as well too, outside of us. So we spent a ton of time doing that to ensure that folks knew what they were getting into, what they needed to get into, and didn't have to spend the significant amount of money that we spent at a very well-funded startup. You could actually be a bootstrap startup and get the information you need in order to figure out, can I actually do consumer lending? Can I actually do commercial lending? Or can I help folks and not have to get a license? Or do I have to get a license? So on and so forth. That's really what kind of drove me. But the underlying emphasis behind that is really helping consumers try to get out of credit card debt, and now really trying to help consumers just be protected where they should be protected, especially as you're starting to see kind of that pendulum shift from the federal government to the state government. It goes back and forth depending upon the administration, but there's always going to be some regulator that is going in trying to protect consumers, and we try to make it easier for you to do that.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So Really, really good baseline there, Chris. So tell us, like at its simplest level, like what does Winnow do, and what does it help institutions and then ultimately consumers to accomplish?
So Winnow is an online state and federal regulatory compliance research engine. We're a reg tech company,
Okay.
and we make it where if you are already in the business, we've got some great clients that are on our website, like Capital One as a client. If you're already in the business and you have licenses, or you're a national bank or your state charter bank or whatever, when you subscribe to Winnow, we bring in that information into Winnow. So if you've got a charter, if you've got 25 or 100 licenses, we bring all of that into Winnow. So when you go in and you say, all right, well, I'm doing consumer lending, I need to understand what my late charge disclosure requirements are. You
Right.
can go into Winnow, click a couple times, and get a survey, what we call a survey. It's what you would go to a law firm to get. And you can see on a nationwide basis what your late charge disclosure requirements are. And then the second you save that survey, we're monitoring it for you in the background. So if anything changes, we're letting you know on a weekly basis, saying, hey, here's what's changed. Here's a red line between what was to what is now. Here's what you need to operationalize. We're cutting out all of the noise to really bring down the time that you got to spend doing this and allow you to better spend you have to do more with less nowadays. Everyone has to. And you're able to spend that money more targeted, as opposed to having, to hire outside counsel and then spend 3 hours trying to figure out what question you should ask them.
Right.
That's really what we do. We also allow for kind of up and coming startups. We have a partnership with Y Combinator to access Winnow for free and figure out, all right, do I really want to get into this business? Do I want to
Okay.
do consumer lending or mortgage lending in the state of West Virginia? And oftentimes the answer may be no. That might be a state that you put,
Okay.
down the road because of their regulatory scheme and whatnot. So that's really what we do. And then we keep folks up to date on all those rules. So we've got over, I think at this point, 84,000 requirements. So that's rules, regulations, statutory or statutes, constitutional articles, all of that. Any official rulemaking, that's all in Winnow. And it's the culmination of, and I'm not exaggerating here, it's the culmination of over 64,000 attorney hours, because we were given the excess hours of all associates and partners and senior counsel at the Buckley firm, and now at the Orrick law firm. We merged with Orrick back in,
Okay.
and since, I mean, it was a very good fit, and Orrick has been extremely supportive of that since then. But now that we, kind of fully built out, we've got a team of attorneys that work for Winnow that just do, updates on that and keeping update, and they're awesome. It's an amazing team that we've got.
Awesome. That's really cool. All right. So you have as your clients larger banks, institutions, all the way down to, I think you said, like smaller regional banks and credit unions. As far as the startups that you serve, what types of businesses, what types of startups would be using Winnow to sort of evaluate how and where they may want to do business?
Really, it's going to be the folks that want to get into financial services. And it might be financial services adjacent. It could be like, hey, we want to help folks get out of debt. It might be that you've got a debt consolidation company that wants to figure out, all right, do I need to have licenses in order to coordinate loans or things like that? Do I need to care about C registration if I'm trying to package loans or
Right.
any of those type of things? That's really kind of where the starting is. Really kind of the, do I need a license to do what I want to do? That's the very beginning, because we go from all the way from do I need a license through what you would call the first notification of default, like in a mortgage or something like that. We cover that box, and it's a big, it's a wide range of things we cover, but that's really what they can get into and understand. So they won't go into this saying, all right, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to raise a round, and I'm going to raise a round as low as I can because I don't want to, I don't want to get too much on there and spend too much money too quickly. But being able to get Winnow for a very reasonable price and go in and say, all right, these are the things I need to understand. How am I going to do it? What people do I need in order to do it? And what do I have to spend to get to where I've done what I need to do in order to operate in the states I want to operate in?
Got it. Got it. All right. That makes sense. So you mentioned you had a previous relationship with your previous employer with the Buckley law firm. And then, sort of that evolved into a relationship that you have today where you essentially have, is it attorneys on staff or is it contracted attorneys? Tell me a little bit about like how, your previous relationship led into your current legal relationship today and how those attorneys ultimately serve your clientele.
Right. So the equity partners at Buckley were amazing, and they literally funded Winnow out of their compensation. That's how a law firm works. If you're going to make investments, it's going to be money that you don't take as compensation.
Right.
and they're amazing people. Our biggest internal champion is a guy named Clint Rockwell. He was a managing partner at Buckley. He's now on the board at Oric. So we were always a wholly owned subsidiary of the Buckley firm. We always maintained a separate company. Still are at Oric. We're a wholly owned subsidiary. So we operate completely independently. When the big data collection was done on all of the products that we offer, so like consumer lending and mortgage and credit card and auto lending and deposits and money transmittal, so on and so forth, earned wage access, when all of that data collection was done, we didn't need access to a ton of those hours anymore because we've got a team of 4 attorneys that do nothing but keep things up to date.
Okay.
If we wanted to do like new data collection, we'd have to either find an arrangement with a different firm or work with Oric to get it, because we really built Winnow to be information agnostic. We spent a year and a half building just the data entry tool, so we can bring in stuff that's like, insurance regulation or SEC regulation or FDA compliance. We just didn't have the subject matter expertise to do that at the Buckley firm. They were a financial services boutique, regulatory enforcement and compliance firm. So that's what we focused on, and that's really where I think I would say there was a vacuum kind of in the marketplace where there wasn't really any innovation there. There wasn't anything that was also relatively inexpensive to get into and use.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. All right, so I want to shift gears a little bit, and let's talk a little bit about the regulatory governing bodies, right? In my business, we are regulated by the SEC, previously by FINRA, but now as a registered investment advisor by the SEC. But I know that a big one in your space is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That institution in and of itself has gone through some transitions with this administration. So talk me through maybe like one by one the different governing bodies and the evolution of each of them and how maybe that's changed what you and your team do.
That is a great question.
You could talk for a while about that. I said
I will try to keep it relatively pithy as much as I can on these things. You hit on the biggest thing first. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, created out of the financial crisis. One of those things that truly was an avenue for consumer financial protection. But at the same time, there may have been a little bit of, depending upon which administration it was and who was leading the CFPB, there may have been an overzealousness or potentially a way too hands-off approach as well to things. But they're the main regulating body. And then you've got folks like the Federal Reserve Bank, the FRB, that will come in, and if you are a member, a bank, you would submit to audit by them. At the same time, from a safety and soundness perspective, you'd be getting the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And between that kind of mishmash, that's also where you see the state level banking start to work as well too. So you've got the FDIC that will come in and look at things from a safety and soundness perspective and a compliance perspective at a state level if you're like a California state chartered bank or something like that. But it all depends upon what you've decided to kind of go into. And then you've got things that are not necessarily solely financial services related, but like the SEC and the FTC and all of those other areas that don't necessarily completely touch money but do tangentially touch money, along with the activities that goes about managing it. So very well, SEC compliance is complex, it is difficult, and honestly the folks that labor at doing it I have nothing but respect for. So it's one of those things that extends out there. But now under the current Trump administration too, we're starting to see a big pullback in regulatory matters. Originally, part of the One Big Beautiful Bill was a moratorium, a 10-year moratorium on any new AI regulations on a state level. That didn't make it through the final draft, and states are going to fill that vacuum now, because previously we had advice on AI from the White House. There was a council at the White House that gave us some advice on that. And then you have states like New York with the New York DFS, the Department of Financial Services, that are coming in and are trying to be very proactive and give some guidelines and rules that you can then hopefully model across the country. But really quick aside, that can go very wrong too. You have states like Colorado that put into play, or almost put into play, it was going to be February, now it's July of next year, where if you did anything to train an LLM, you brought something new in that wasn't just off the shelf when you bought it, you became a developer. And a
Okay.
developer is subject to tenfold the amount of rules and regulations that Colorado had put in place for customers of AI models. So you didn't want that. No one wants that. No one should be governed by that. It's not sustainable. So luckily, the legislature in Colorado had said, all right, we're gonna put this off another 6 months on top of the 6 months. We already put it off, and hopefully we'll end up with something that's better. But that's where you really get these trade organizations like the American Fintech Council. I would put out right out in front. They're there advocating on behalf of fintechs and lenders and banks and credit unions on a day-to-day basis, trying to lobby when Congress is in session, trying to lobby to ensure that the rules and regulations are appropriate, are not too reactionary or not principles based, because we're trying to get back to a real principles based manner of regulation where it's not, okay, so you strictly failed this one type threshold, but everything else was appropriate, even though that threshold actually benefited the borrower. Getting back to a little bit more of that, and also trying to get away from ruling by enforcement. So you're not going to figure out what the rules are until someone comes in and actually does an enforcement action and says, hey, bank A, you can't do this anymore because of X, Y, and Z. And that's when all of the banks around them that are competitors say, well, we better not do the same thing. Trying to get away from that as well, too. And that leads me, and I'll try to wrap up quickly here, but that leads me to the state level regulators.
Right.
You have, on a state level, multiple different regulatory bodies, multiple different licensing schemes potentially. In California, I mean, you can lend under more than 6 licenses at this point. You can be a CRMLA lender, you can be a CFLL lender, you can be a small balance lender. It's one of those things where there are so many different licenses, and understanding those is important, and figuring out where you fit in, because you don't want to over inundate yourself by having to maintain multiple licenses and subject yourself to rules and regulations that may not necessarily be applicable to what you're doing. And then you multiply that out by 51, or if you also include Guam and Puerto Rico, by 53, and you've got what we're dealing with on a state-by-state basis. Most of the time, they're not talking to each other. There is a great organization called the CSBS, the Conference of State Banking Supervisors.
Right.
That's where they kind of get together and talk. But it's not like we've got the FFIEC that coordinates between multiple agencies. CSBS is there as like a sounding board, so people can put out and say, this is what we're planning on doing. And maybe, California gives a little bit of insight as to what Illinois might do, or so on and so forth. Because you have the leading states like California and New York, and Washington and Illinois. And then you have some states that are also, I would say, more company friendly, more corporation friendly, where you've got, so it's like Iowa and Nebraska and where you see in Wyoming, where you see those kind of Utah, like industrial thrifts and banks that aren't necessarily as heavily regulated, but are getting into really cool, innovative things and helping other companies out. I apologize for taking so long to kind of get into that, but because we have such a mishmash in the United States there are also cities and counties that also have their own licensing. Like the city of Yonkers, New York, has its own debt collection license.
Wow.
The city of Chicago has its own debt collection license. So all of those things also play into what you need to do in order to be in compliance.
Yeah. Hence why your services are valuable. I could see it now. All right. So
I hope so.
let's distill this down for the average consumer, the average investor, the average saver, if you will. Help us to understand. You did a great job of articulating all of the nuances that go into the varying degrees of compliance and a lot of times at the local and regional and state level. But for the average consumer out there, help them to understand, like, what protection did they have? How are they being protected, whether it be on the banking side, on the credit side, on the investing side? Like, help them just to understand, like, what's out there today that's acting on their behalf.
Sure. So it's one of those things I would say, and this is advice that I don't often take myself either. So please don't think that it's one of those things you should do. I mean, you should do it every single time, ideally. But there's that terms and conditions document that you agree to without reading almost every single time. And we're all guilty of it. But inside of those is really what the governing terms and conditions of the relationship you have with that body are. You should read the highlights of those, because oftentimes you are getting into things like an arbitration agreement where you can't sue them if they do something wrong to you. You have to go to binding arbitration. or it might be mediation, and they choose where the mediators are or what the mediation company is, and so on and so forth. But in terms of protection, consumers have it. They have the ability to go and make a complaint to their state regulator if it's a state chartered bank or something like that. This is where it becomes difficult, is that most folks don't know, all right, well, if I'm making a complaint against a national bank, who am I going to? Am I going to the OCC? Am I going to the state that the bank is headquartered in? What am I doing? Am I going to the attorney general? And the answer to that is it could be all of them. And that's not a great system. Obviously, it's great to start with an elevated complaint at a part in the bank. Most banks, most credit unions, most companies will have something they kind of refer to as like an office of the president or office of the executive or something like that, where you can send an escalated complaint. And because of the rules and regulations that we have in place governing financial institutions, they've got to reply to you in a certain amount of time. Most of that time is it's 30 days, 30 calendar days. Sometimes it might be 60 days, but they have to give you a reply nonetheless, and it's got to be something that you can understand. Can't be written in complete legalese where you don't have any ability to understand. It's got to be written for a normal consumer, for a person that would otherwise be the general customer of that bank, of that mortgage lender or whatnot. But there are rules that protect you. There are rules that say you can't, or usury rules that say bodies can't charge a usurious rate of interest. You can't be charged 700% interest on a loan.
Right.
You can only be charged a certain amount of interest on a loan. You can only have your payment due every so often, depending upon the product that you're in. There are rules that exist, and most of those come down from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, from the OCC. They come down from state regulators as well too. All of these are part of the disclosures you also see. Like if you go and you open up a savings account, you're going to get either an electronic version or a paper version of the Truth in Savings disclosure. And that Truth in Savings disclosure is going to give you a ton of different acronyms like APY, your annual percentage yield. You're going to see those things, and you can understand. It should be understandable. That's the thing. Should be understandable that, all right, you're going to get this rate of interest on a return over this period of time. Those things are all in place to be able to protect consumers so they understand the product they're getting into. But when you start getting into crazy things like reverse mortgages,
Right.
Negative amortization products where, they're paying you on a house that maybe you own free and clear. So they're slowly building up a mortgage against your house.
Yeah.
Those type of products, they have special education requirements. You actually have to go through counseling in order to get a reverse mortgage, because oftentimes reverse mortgages are taken out by older people, and they need to understand that, look, if you take out this type of product, you are saying I'm going to get paid on a monthly basis for my house, but there will be a lien on my house at the end of this term that I have to pay back, or else sell the house and pay it off.
Mhm.
So it's not one of those things from an estate planning perspective that you normally, outside of certain situations, are like, let's bring it in and figure it out. Those rules are available to consumers. They are. You can go in and you can see them. You can go to the CFPB website and you can look up, how am I protected and things like that. And you can get those, but it's not easy. It's unfortunate that we just don't make that super easy in this country. California's done a really good job to actually get out those rules out front. And they've got offices of innovation and offices of consumer awareness that push that out there. Other states have the same type of offices, but you've got to really do a little bit of your own research. Unfortunately, it's going in, and if you're trying to figure out, all right, well, I got a car loan and my first payment was due 15 days after they dispersed it. How is that possible?
Right.
And it could be that in the terms and conditions of the loan you took, you said, hey, I'm understanding that because I'm getting such and such an interest rate or whatnot, or this is my amortization schedule, meaning the time in which the months or years that you're paying the loan over, that your payment is due in 15 days. So you could have agreed to that. But there are also things protecting you, like if you have a balloon payment on a ridiculously expensive car, on a Porsche or a Ferrari or something like that, and there's a giant balloon payment at the end of the loan, that's got to be disclosed to you. That's got to be out there. You got to be seen. And really, a lot of it kind of boils down to the consumer has to step back and do a comparison. You shouldn't take the first thing that's offered to you. I mean, I'm sure you know this as in the business that you're in. You don't necessarily say, all right, well, I've got a prospectus on this investment. I'm going for it, and that's it. You're like, I'm going to look at 5 or 6 of these prospectuses. That's how you pluralize prospectus. And
Respect
I'm
I.
yeah, prospecti. And I'm going to see which one's best for me, which one that doesn't, have a high fee load on top of it and whatnot. But unfortunately, in the US, it's really at the consumer's discretion to do that type of comparison. We've made it a little easier in things like mortgage lending, where you get the truth in lending statements, where you can see what your interest rate's going to be, what you're going to pay over the life of the loan for the cost of the loan, what your amortization schedule might be, and kind of where that seesaw tips where you start paying more principal instead of interest. But then you have kind of the more exotic products like a 5-year fixed and a 25-year adjustable, where people have a great payment for the first 5 years and all of a sudden they want to jack it up 3% at the end of that term. And you're like, well, my payment went from $3,000 a month to $4,500 a month. I can't afford that. Those are what folks have to just really be diligent about themselves in order to figure out if it works for them or not. You've got to be your own self-advocate, or you should work with, folks like you guys. You should work with certified financial advisors and planners to figure out what this is. And there are, multiple levels of that. We have apps now and everything else that you have certified professionals that you can go to that are not completely expensive. And it's just, you want someone that's working for you, for you. You want someone that's not necessarily completely working on commissions from the company they work for. We don't have that so much in mortgage anymore, with extra money coming in for like APR loan, or excuse me, not APR loans, for adjustable loans.
Right.
But it still exists out there.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for me, I believe in having an advisor, an advocate, a fiduciary that is working for you in some capacity or another, whether it's a financial planner or advisor like we do, but that can help you distill some of the fine print, so to speak, right? And if they're a fiduciary, they're acting in your best interest. They have to act in your best interest, whether it comes to your investments, your banking, your lending, or any sort of spectrum with respect to financial services. The other thing I would add, you mentioned at the beginning of our discussion, AI, but don't just sign off on the fine print. At minimum, take the disclosure, take the fine print, and feed it into an AI model and get a summary, right? Because very few people are going to read it all, but at least get a summary and ask it to distill down what are the terms that you're agreeing to here before you sign any sort of financial document. So really, really good thoughts there.
That's a great point. That is an excellent point. And I would totally agree with that, both on the fiduciary and on having kind of AI summary or whatnot.
Yeah, given your background, you're probably pretty good at breaking down legal documents, but the average consumer isn't, right? So the ability to be able to then go use some sort of large language model to be able to do that for you and save you time, but also break down the complexities is a really, really good best practice. And we've seen that a lot in our space. All right, great stuff, Chris. Really, really appreciate your insights there. We're gonna shift gears a little bit. We're gonna get to know Chris a little bit better. Officially entering into the lightning round, Chris. So
Okay.
we never tell our guests about the lightning round. It's all about just having an organic thought and just sharing the first thing that comes to your mind. So it could be a one word or it could be a long drawn out thought. You ready?
I am ready. I'm as ready as I can be, I guess.
All right, sounds good. We always start with an easy one: coffee or tea?
Tea. I don't drink coffee. I
Okay,
like
all
my
right.
caffeine carbonated, so it might be a soda, honestly, in the morning, which is terrible.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Sounds good. One meal for the rest of your life. What is it?
Wow, one meal for the rest of my life. That is a difficult one. I mean, I'd like to live a decent amount of time longer, so I'd probably say some sort of really tasty salad, like a chef
Okay.
salad, or potentially like a salmon Caesar salad with not too much
Sounds good.
dressing.
That sounds good. And you could operate on that for a while. Well said. Good job. What's one tool or piece of technology other than your phone or your computer? So it could be hardware or software that you can't live without.
I use Superhuman for email.
Okay, you know what? It's funny. I'm about to start on Superhuman, so you can be my advocate for that. That sounds good. I like it.
Superhuman is amazing, and I cannot sing its praises enough.
Okay, good. I'm happy to hear that. Do you have a favorite quote or phrase about business or success?
About business or success? I might give you a couple. There's a question actually that's literally up on my wall off screen right now that says, "Who do you want to be right now?"
Oh, I love that.
I ask myself that question multiple times a day. If I get into decision paralysis or task
Uh,
paralysis, I look up at that and I'm like, Who do you want to be right now? Do you want to be this guy that's having a hard time figuring out what's next to do on the to-do list, that's horizontal to-do list in terms of priority? Or do you want to be someone else? Then I have a weird one that really goes to kind of the aggressive nature that used to be in a lot of this and still is in some folks in financial services. It's a very odd quote to bring forward because it's from Richard Nixon. But in his waning days, he said, there are people that hate you, but they don't win unless you hate them, and then you destroy yourself. So you don't need to look at other companies and other competitors and things like that as enemies and actively dislike them. They can exist. Just do what you're doing better.
Right.
Be present, be more aggressive in trying to put a better product out there. Don't focus on, I've just got to get those guys or whatnot.
Well said. That's a really good one. I hadn't heard that one before. That's a really good one. Do you have either a routine or a personal hack you can share with our audience?
I am both analog and digital. Honestly, I start with a to-do list on a day-to-day
Okay.
basis. I write that out. I spend my first few minutes doing that. But then that to-do list may morph into working on that same list on a Remarkable Pro Move is a great new product. I'm not paid by them or compensated, but it's a great form factor. It's much smaller than having a giant one. And I like e-ink tablets because there's not the internet on it. I have an iPad and everything and a MacBook Pro as well. But I take the extra weight to carry around tablets, actual journals, only write with like fountain pens. I love fountain pens because I have such bad penmanship.
Yeah.
So it also lets me like enjoy the pen that I'm using. So my hack is really to write everything down, get it all out of my brain. It's not a unique hack, but get it all out of my brain and then use it to morph throughout the day. Because it might be that list moves into being electronic and then I can rewrite it. So I commit to memory as well as have it on there. Like, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. If I don't do a brain dump on that, it's difficult for me to get everything done. And at the end of the day, honestly, with my family, we sit around, we've got these gratitude journals where we literally take 5 minutes to write in something it could be literally like, I've got got a free slushie in the lunch line. I've got high school kids. I've got a free high school and a junior high kid. I've got a free slushie in the lunch line. I'm thankful for that. It doesn't have to be profound. It's just showing that gratitude because we all need to realize that we're not entitled to anything that we have. We may work hard, and I agree, I work hard, and my wife does, my kids do, but anything that we have can be taken away like that. So I don't want to ever be ungrateful for something that's coming my way. I've benefited from a ton of people believing in me that I otherwise, not everybody gets that. And
Sure.
it's all dependent upon, my attitude, who I knew. I mean, in today's day and society, what I look like, that I'm a man, all of that goes in to play. And I don't want to be ungrateful for it. I don't want to feel entitled to it because I'm not. So that's what I try to instill in my kids and also in the folks that work with me.
I'm a big believer in end of the day gratitude. I think it's like a great thing to kind of complete the day with. And I do it right before bed, but I think you've prompted me to bring it to the dinner table now. So I like that suggestion. Really, really good one. All right. Last one. What advice would you give your younger self?
Probably say eat better. That'd be the first one because
Well, you
I've
got the Sam and Caesar going now, so you're
yeah,
doing
no,
that.
yeah, but I mean, there were a lot of years, especially post bankruptcy at Lehman Brothers, where it
Sure.
was all right. Well, I'm here at work. It's 9:30 at night. I'm working on something for the bankruptcy court for the Alvarez and Marsal folks for tomorrow, and it's just garbage. Definitely have gained and lost a lot of weight. Thankfully, been on the lower end for a long time now.
Good for
I
you.
would say eat better, but at the same time, I would also probably say you don't need to spend 15, 17 hours at the office
Right.
to be productive. I'm at home now and I've found that, since I've kind of been able to work from home and again, grateful for being able to do that, but work from home regularly for like the last 15 years. That's huge. But I also think that going into the office is important and talking with your team members is important. Even it could be virtual or whatnot, but I wouldn't go back and I wouldn't spend that much time away from my family. I have to travel too often nowadays, and I try to just group it all together where I get it done all at the same time if I can do that, if I'm speaking at conferences or something like that. But I always make time to, spend on FaceTime with them, text them throughout the day. I'd probably tell my younger self, you don't necessarily need to do this. You don't have to be at work for 17 hours a day because you remember you were in there by yourself for 5 hours for most of those times. So
Right.
it's not like someone else is looking over your shoulder. And I'd probably also say be as grateful and as generous as possible. And I've tried to do that in my life regardless, but even my younger self, I'd say, look, wherever you can, give back. Help mentor folks that are coming up in the industry because I had that. Help, bring people in here. If you've got a friend, especially now when you see them on LinkedIn, and it's odd because we have so many openings for jobs on a nationwide basis, but people are having these horror stories of 100, 200 applications sent, and it's all about who you know. So if you know someone and you know someone that is looking for something, put them together,
Right.
make the connection, help that person out. It's been great that I've been able to do that a couple times over the last year. And not everything you do should have to benefit you. If it can
Sure.
benefit someone else and truly help improve their lives, do that. And you don't have to do it loudly. It's one
Sure.
of those things like the best kind of charity is the quiet charity.
Right.
The best kind of help is the quiet help. Just do that. It's much better to put good in. I know I'm sounding a little bit new age or whatnot, but it's much better to put good and kindness and love into the world. You get it back tenfold, and at the same time, you've been privileged to get it your entire career for the most part. I mean, especially if you're someone like me or whatnot. You've had a lot of people. I've had a lot of people that believed in me. I want to believe in other people. I want to help people understand they should believe in the people they're trying to bring up the next generation.
I love it. So well said. That's a great place to stop. Chris, thanks for joining us. If our listeners want to connect with you, collaborate, work with you, learn a little bit more about you and your firm, what's the best way to connect or reach?
We're at www.winnow, that's winnow.law, which is an interesting, domain extension, but that's where we're at, winnow.law. I'm really easy. I'm Chris at winnow.law. You can feel free to email me directly. I don't screen my emails and such for, folks folks are looking for a question, have a question, want to have some sort of dialogue. I'm open to it. And then on LinkedIn, we're Winnow Solutions on LinkedIn. You can feel free to drop a line to our page, follow us if you'd like. And we're actually really responsive. We come from a line of people that built product. I come from a legal and compliance background. Everyone else that I've brought onto the team comes from either a product background, a design background, project management background. So we care about the user experience. We care about what you're looking at, how you're interacting with it. So we try to be as responsive as humanly possible because that's the only way you're actually going to keep people engaged. I think it's horrible stat or whatever. When you get somebody onto your website, you get, I think, like 4.5 seconds before they make a decision as to whether or not they want to move on.
Stay
So we
there.
try to grab you where we can and actually get you to dig in deeper.
Very cool. Very cool. Well said. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate your insights. This was a lot of fun.
I really appreciate being on. And thank you for listening to me wax poetic and probably go over long on certain questions. It's a wonderful opportunity to do that. I hope that other folks have the opportunity to do it. This has really been a lot of fun, and the way that you approach this has probably been honestly one of the best experiences I've had on doing a podcast like this.
Thank
So
you.
I truly appreciate that you actually, you care about what your guests are trying to say, and I would recommend it honestly to anybody that's on the bubble about whether or not they want to accept that invitation from you, Dan.
Thanks a lot, Chris. I appreciate that. And yeah, that's what we're trying to do here. So that's it for the episode. You can find our podcast along with our newsletter and YouTube channel all for free at makingsenseofyourmoney.com. And as always, prioritize your version of a rich life.